in association with Brookdale Lunch and Meat.
Ready?
All right, AP Gov, hope you had a good weekend. Those are going to be the notes today. We're getting into civil liberties, really important section of Unit 3. We're going to get into 8 court cases over the next couple of weeks. So that tells me the fact that we've gotten through 5 in the previous units, 8 in this section alone. I think most likely on April 3rd, the College Board's going to come out and say one of the 2 essays that you're going to do is going to be the Supreme Court comparison. Really important stuff here. A lot of court cases coming at you. The good thing is most of them are really pretty simple. They're not like that Shaw versus Reno or Baker versus Carr where this stuff gets pretty complicated. A lot of this stuff has to do with civil liberties, so it has to do with things like free speech and free exercise of religion. Really pretty straightforward. All right. Okay, so we're going to start off with this section with civil liberties. Civil liberties, I said in a previous video, protect individuals from government action. Our civil liberties that we find in the Bill of Rights protect us from the government. In the original Constitution, we see a few civil liberties are protected. Things such as habeas corpus and no ex post facto laws, no bills of attainder as well. I forgot to write that on the slide, bill of attainder. Not super important, but I'll mention what it is in a second. Habeas corpus is Latin. It literally translates to produce the body. What that means is that the federal government just cannot arrest you because they don't like you, throw you in jail, and then just simply leave you there. Habeas corpus means that you have to go before a judge pretty quickly. They've got to tell you what law they're accusing you of breaking and then put you on trial pretty quickly. All right, so habeas corpus prevents the government from just arbitrarily throwing you in jail and saying, we're just keeping you here, we're not charging you with a crime or anything, okay? It can be suspended in a time of war, all right? So Lincoln actually did that during the Civil War. Anybody he suspected of being a Confederate sympathizer in those border states like Maryland, the federal government actually, we're in a time of war, suspended habeas corpus and actually threw anybody they suspected of being a Confederate sympathizer in prison because they were afraid that those border states might start to join the South, and that would have been pretty disastrous for the North. No ex post facto laws. All right, so let me set this one up. Let's say you're committing some kind of action, and it's legal for you to do so. Okay, let's say maybe you're manufacturing alcohol, something like that. Then all of a sudden, the 18th Amendment happens, and the 18th Amendment says no manufacturing of alcohol in the United States. This would prevent the federal, and let's say you stop. So you're like, okay, well, this is illegal now, I'm not going to do it. Ex post facto laws would be laws that would punish you for committing that action when it was legal, because now it's illegal. So you were perfectly within your rights of manufacturing alcohol prior to the 18th Amendment, but now there's the 18th Amendment, and now Congress has passed a law and said, well, you were doing this, even though it was legal at the time, well, we're still going to punish you for it. So the fact that the Constitution says no ex post facto laws prohibits Congress from punishing you for an action that at the time was legal, even though later on it becomes illegal. A bill of attainder, that's Attainder. Bills of attainder just punish groups for it prevents Congress from passing laws that would punish groups without a trial. All right. Don't get too hung up on that vocab, habeas corpus, ex post facto laws, and bills of attainder. Not all that important. Really, what's the important stuff is the Bill of Rights. All right, so most civil liberties are found in the Bill of Rights. Okay, if you look down at the bottom, it says examples of American civil liberties. 5 of those are found in the First Amendment, right? Freedom to bear arms would be your Second Amendment. That's a civil liberty as well. Third Amendment, right? No quartering soldiers. Again, civil liberties, right? The government can't just arbitrarily put soldiers in your home. Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, right? That's kind of the big one, which is government cannot come and search your property without a warrant. There's got to be probable cause. Okay. Fifth Amendment, there's a lot with trials and your rights of the accused. Sixth Amendment, kind of the big one, is even if you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. Again, rights of the accused. Seventh Amendment kind of gets into civil cases and such, rights of the accused as well. Eighth Amendment, right? No cruel and unusual punishment. You don't need to be writing all this down. I'm just mentioning these are civil liberties. And then the Ninth Amendment, they're basically saying just because we've mentioned you have all these civil liberties doesn't mean you don't have others. All right. 10th Amendment, not so much, right? Really just kind of sets up federalism. Okay, one of the questions early on in the United States was, do states need to recognize your civil liberties in the Bill of Rights? And really, they didn't. Okay, so originally the Bill of Rights only applied to the federal government. Look at the First Amendment. It says, Congress shall make no law. Well, if you're a Supreme Court justice and there's a case in front of you that where somebody's trying to sue a state for violating one of their civil liberties found in the Bill of Rights, you're gonna look at the Constitution and you say, well, nowhere does it say in the Bill of Rights do states have to recognize this, because it really just, it's speaking directly to Congress. And in fact, that's what the Supreme Court decided. So in Barron versus Baltimore, okay, this is a court case. This guy had a business on the bay in Baltimore. Baltimore had drained a lot of the bay, hurting his business. I think it was basically a dock he had, or I think it was housing ships, something like that. They drained the bay, and he sues the federal government. Now, this is prior to the 14th Amendment. This is pre-Civil War, all right? And he's looking to the Fifth Amendment. He's like, hey, you've denied me property, because you see there it says, no person shall be deprived of property. And at the bottom there, this is a concept known as eminent domain. It says, if the federal government takes private property for public use, can't do it without just compensation. In other words, you got to pay me, for the revenue you have deprived me. Okay, the federal government cannot just build a highway through your farmland without providing you just compensation. Okay, that's called eminent domain. That's found in the Fifth Amendment. And he's basically saying, here's the grounds I have to sue Baltimore for the fact that they've drained the bay and it's hurt my business. Well, the problem is, nowhere in the Bill of Rights does it speak to the states. It's only talking to the federal government, right? It says Congress shall make no law. So what the Supreme Court decided was the Bill of Rights do not apply to the states. The Bill of Rights only apply to the federal government. Again, this is pre-14th Amendment. 14th Amendment is going to change this, right? 14th Amendment is a big-time game changer, probably one of the most important amendments in the Constitution. But we're prior to the 14th Amendment here, and the Supreme Court's going to say Bill of Rights don't apply to the states. Okay, with the 14th Amendment, now the 14th Amendment is starting to talk to the states, right? So look to the right, it says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. If you're barren and the 14th Amendment exists, then you're going to look to that 14th Amendment, and you're like, look, hey, you state, right? Maryland, you've deprived me of property. There's got to be some just compensation there. However, this didn't exist at the time. Now you've got that 14th Amendment, all right? The process by which the Supreme Court has used the 14th Amendment's due process clause to apply the Bill of Rights to the states, this is known as selective incorporation. So again, originally Bill of Rights didn't apply to the states, but then through various court cases, you're going to see that. A lot of these cases coming up are called selective incorporation cases. They're going to start to apply the Bill of Rights to the states and say, hey, states, you've got to start recognizing these provisions in the Bill of Rights. The first court case to do that was Gitlow versus New York. This guy Gitlow is living in New York, and he had violated some law that New York had that essentially limited free speech. I think he was a socialist. He's handing out this manifesto, basically talking about how workers should strike and such. New York had a law basically prohibiting that. However, the difference between Gitlow versus New York and Barron versus Baltimore is now you have that 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment says states can't deny liberty without due process. Well, here's what the Supreme Court's going to do. They're going to look at this case because he appealed this case to the Supreme Court. It goes before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, it's one of the questions is, Does the First Amendment's free speech apply to the states? And the Supreme Court's going to look at that 14th Amendment due process clause, and they're going to say a basic liberty is free speech. States can't deny that basic liberty of free speech. This starts the process of what's called the Incorporation Doctrine, also known as Selective Incorporation, where through various court cases, the Supreme Court starts to apply the Bill of Rights to the states. Okay, that's all I'm going to give you guys today. That's some pretty conceptual stuff. It's probably going to take you a couple of days to really kind of wrap your mind around selective incorporation. As we get into the court cases, these selective incorporation court cases, it's going to start to make more and more sense. Super important concept, all right? Checks and balances is the number one concept. These interactions among the branches, the checks and balances, if that's the most important concept in AP Gov, which it is, selective incorporation is not far behind, okay? So if you need to watch this video a couple of times, kind of wrap your mind around this, I would highly suggest also maybe getting into the book I gave you guys, reading about selective incorporation a little bit, but it will start to make more sense as we get into these court cases.